NFL players still frustrated with roughing the passer rule. It's really hard to do your job. Michael Bennett's penalty Sunday for a low hit on Kirk Cousins made the Eagles the latest team irked with the NFL's roughing the passer provisions. There was ample furor earlier this season when penalty flags were flying during NFL games for roughing the passer penalties that weren't, in many cases, all that rough. The consternation was particularly intense over two calls made against Green Bay Packers linebacker Clay Matthews for what some day described as textbook tackles. Many players and fans expressed their dismay that hits on quarterbacks had been all but banned, in their view, by the league. The NFL's competition committee intervened, issuing a clarification intended by committee members to change the way in which the roughing the passer rule was being officiated and put that enforcement more in line with the committee's expectations. The flag fest of the season's first 3 weeks was curtailed in Week 4, and everything calmed down. Some NFL defensive players still are not satisfied. The number of roughing the passer penalties crept back up during the Week 5 games this past weekend, and members of the Philadelphia Eagles defense were particularly miffed about a call against defensive end Michael Bennett for a low hit on quarterback Kirk Cousins that played a part in their loss Sunday at home to the Minnesota Vikings. "I think they just sometimes lack common sense," Eagles safety Malcolm Jenkins, speaking of the rules safeguarding quarterbacks, said after Sunday's game. "I get it. We want to protect quarterbacks, and I completely understand that. They're the lifeblood to our game. But it's really hard to do your job, and it's having an effect on some games. But we had plenty of other opportunities to win the game. That was just one play that was a little frustrating. A dangerous precedent." Mike Pereira and Dean Blondino hate the NFL's roughing the passer calls. There were 11 roughing the passer penalties assessed in Week 5. That was back near the levels seen in the season's first 3 weeks, in which roughing the passer was called 34 times. There were only 5 roughing the passer calls in the Week 4 games, immediately after the competition committee met by conference call a week sooner than scheduled at the behest of NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. The big issue in the season's first 3 weeks was related to the competition committee's directive to game officials, via a point of emphasis, to enforce an existing rule prohibiting a defender from landing on a quarterback with most or all of his body weight. The second of Matthews's controversial early season penalties, for a hit on the Washington Redskins' Alex Smith, stemmed from that. The first of the uproar-inducing penalties called on Matthews was for lifting Cousins off the ground in a game against the Vikings before taking him to the turf. NFL players still frustrated with roughing the passer rule. It's really hard to do your job. Michael Bennett's penalty Sunday for a low hit on Kirk Cousins made the Eagles the latest team irked with the NFL's roughing the passer provisions. There was ample furor earlier this season when penalty flags were flying during NFL games for roughing the passer penalties that weren't, in many